side.
What's his business called?
Favretto Fish or something like that.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's like it's been his for a long time. And he specializes in high-class restaurants that get fresh fish. He never freezes it. He ships it fresh to all the different places so that they can charge an arm and a leg, etc. for it, I suppose. He also, I think, supplies Costco in town. There's some places that he does, I guess, but
Costco.
the fresh fish, not the frozen, of course.
Oh, okay.
Just the
It
fresh
has to be
fish.
fresh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he does not deal with freezing or that kind of stuff.
There's a Japanese guy that hangs out down there in one of those resort towns in Mexico, Baja California. Every time someone catches one of those rare blue tunas, he gives them $25,000 for it, freezes the tuna, takes it over there to Japan, and sells it for $90,000 a square pound.
Holy shit!
So this guy's got a 300-pound giant rare blue tuna fish that he's making bank on.
$90,000 a pound. Holy, oh Jesus, that's crazy.
Oh, like,
I've been in the
that's
wrong
the life.
industry.
You betcha.
He's sitting on the beach,
Oh, you got a
drinking his
tuna?
pina coladas.
25 grand. Here you go. Cool.
Goes down to the fish market, sees what's down there. Some tourist catches a big blue tuna,
So
buys it off the
this
spot.
just tells us who we're doing. And so, yeah, we're doing Quine today. That's all I even put there, just
Quine.
Quine. Whoa, another first. Ooh. Wow, I think now we have almost half the class here.
Really? How many people are in this class?
None.
I thought you said none for a second. I was like, I feel offended. I don't count as a human. 9. Yes, good job. That was 9. Wow, that's not a
Sign
lot of
language,
people.
9.
9?
9.
Really?
In any case.
Is it
so-
because you don't have to use this hand?
Well,
It's
the
just
sign
the.
language,
Well,
it's,
6, 7, 8,
it's
9.
different. Yeah, it's a 6.
6, 7, 8,
6, 7.
9? I don't know. I don't understand. I don't do the sign.
You know why 6 doesn't like to stand next to 7.
6, 7, 8, 9?
Yeah. Ha. Ha. Do you want to hear a joke? I got a joke.
Pojals.
Okay. How much does it cost for a pirate to get his ears pierced?
Pieces of 8? No.
That's a good guess.
How much?
A buccaneer. Ding, 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 ding. There you go. That should be the quiz question. Send me all the good jokes.
I could do that.
Yeah, I could do
That would be fun.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know. That's
Okay,
my favorite.
Quine.
Oh, wait.
Quine.
Quine. All right.
It's time. Wait.
Is it time?
Quine, yes.
Okay,
So,
it's time for Quine.
So Quine, da-da-ta, ta-da-ta. I actually met Quine in person.
Wow.
Shined his shoes. No.
Yeah.
Would you like your laces? No. Quine
Are you supposed
gave
to ask how we used to make so much
Quine
shoes?
gave a lecture at my alma mater. I got to sit in the front row
Wow.
in Phillips Memorial Hall and listen to it. And it was fascinating. And of course, it was almost like the Pope had come to Westchester. We were like, the whole department was there and picked him up. Actually, I guess he stopped on his way because he was en route from one location to another.
Job update.
We even made his book in Quine's book on his life, which I keep going to the wrong mouse.
That's there are 2 mouse. Mice.
The time of my life.
I don't know. You can't say niece.
Which, by the way, is the most boring biography ever written.
The time of my life.
Yes, the time of my life.
You read the whole thing?
think I fell asleep too many times to have actually finished the whole thing. But yeah, it was.
That's
It's
unfortunate.
like
What is he talking
the
about?
kind of biography that a mathematical logician would write, actually. Precisely, you know. By the way, it was also cool that teaching here, I twice had grandchildren of Quine's in my class. That was cool because one of his daughters, who married a gentleman named Roberts, so her last name is Roberts, had children who went to UAA and both took Intro to Philosophy, and it was amazing because of course I require a term paper as part of, and I thought for sure granddaughters of Quine would do a term paper on Quine. I remember they even, they knew of course that he was their grandfather. They were like, I can't believe you're doing, a class on my grandfather. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize he was like important, that kind of thing. And in fact, I guess most people don't know that Quine was important.
His own grandchildren.
His own grandchildren.
Wait, he's famous?
So
in a sense.
So it surprised me that they didn't pick him to do.
I mean,
It was like,
boring.
whoa. But well, he was still important.
Fair.
It's just his life was, we traveled here. We went to this. We traveled here. We went to this. Then we traveled here. Then we went to this. Then we traveled here. On the way, we stopped at here. And so the little bit of my alma mater got less than a sentence. It was a comma. We stopped at Westchester and gave a lecture, comma, and then So that's my whole, claim to fame. Is that, comma segmented section of one sentence in the most boring biography ever written. So, okay, but in any case, he was important, and he won the Kyoto Prize. Did you ever hear of the Kyoto Prize?
Nope. Couldn't tell ya.
I misspelled it, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
That's because. So Willard Van Orman Quine. By the way, he's a Manx.
I'm sorry, what?
A Manx. Ever heard of the Manx? This is a fun class today, isn't it?
We're just learning left and right.
You had never heard. M-A-N-X.
Manx. That's a. Okay, what? I'm sorry.
They are Celtic people originating in the island of Man in the Irish Sea in northern Europe. So that's where the male line is from.
Got it.
Don't know about, the others, But so when he talks about his background, he likes referring to the grandfather's line, which is Manx. By the way, I think the whole town where he grew up was full of Manx people. It was like a group right there, that kind of thing. In any case, Oberlin was the first college he went to, and that was in Ohio, right, Oberlin. Then from there he went to Harvard. B.F. Skinner was his roommate. Is that weird? Can you imagine? And what a beautiful little tidbit was that neither of them knew what they wanted to study. They got there, and after getting to know one another, B.F. Skinner suggested to Quine that he become a philosopher, and Quine recommended that Skinner become a biologist.
Huh.
And so it was kind of interesting
And
that
then it was
their meeting caused them to, So B.F. Skinner, of course, goes on to give us behavioral psychology. Maybe it was psychology, not biology. What field is that?
We talked about him in our psychology class.
Yeah, so maybe psychology. Whatever the field was, that it was his
That
roommate
one field.
Quine that recommended that's what he should do. It could have meant that, when they got to meet one another, the one said, "You're an airhead," and the other one said, "You're crazy." And, so philosophy, psychology. I don't know how that happened. In any case, as you notice, he is dead now. So I can't not even like Jeremy Bentham, where I can here's Jeremy Bentham, feel him out. Which, by the way, I just visited him the other day again with my Oculus Rift. So I double checked on how you would actually get to see him. So you have to come from, I think it's Piccadilly Circus in London, and you have to get to the London University and go to the main building, and his box with his body is in the hallway just before you go off to the provost and the...
I'm sorry, he's buried inside a university? Yeah, he's in a box, sorry. He's in a box in a university.
On display.
To get rid of this mouse. Let's do it this way.
No thanks. Okay.
I have had one student actually do a selfie with Jeremy Bentham.
Of course you have.
So if you're in London and you stop by the University of
I will be next August.
London,
Oh god.
There is his
Oh
box.
my lord. Is that his actual body?
yeah, except, and I don't know why you can't see it in this picture, but in other pictures you could see his actual face is at his feet, and it's mummified.
What?
So that's a wax face, but that is his actual body.
But then they put his face, they decapitated him?
I don't think that hurts when you're dead.
It doesn't matter. That's kind of disrespectful. Did he want to be on display?
I believe the will
Literally said, I want to
said
be
that
put
he
in
wanted
this-
to attend all of the board meetings in the future. And so they have him in this box, and if you could see, this is like a cabinet with another cabinet inside that has the glass. And so they can take the other, in fact, I think it's on wheels, so they just wheel it out. And I checked. It clearly will fit through the provost's door. So I think the board meetings happen down that hallway. So I think some guy comes out and wheels Jeremy in and they sign him in. So he is present at the board meetings. But this
Well, now
is
I've
this
seen
is this is in like the little lobby where the provost office is like this way and this way to the cafe where you can get hot chocolate.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
Or tea.
Knowing that there's a
And
dead
it's
man.
England, I
in the
guess
same-
tea would be,
Correct.
And I think the bookstore is down on the right, and you come out and it's like the lobby of the not the
whether I
lobby,
should
but
be
the
ashamed that I'm
square
English now or something.
of there's a gate where you students can come in. Across from the gate is another building from the college, the university. So, and it's close to
That's weird.
Shaftesbury Avenue,
That's weird. That's
which I guess is like the big theater district. Anybody been to London? But if you're
No,
on
no,
Shaftesbury
no.
Avenue and you're traveling along, that's where like all the different big theaters are, like kind of like Broadway, I guess. And so, and by the way, Shaftesbury Avenue is also where Hermione takes Ron and Harry when they suddenly disapparate out of the wedding party because it's being attacked. So be careful if you disapparate on Shaftesbury Avenue. There are buses that could almost run you over.
Are you talking about the Sabbath book?
Pardon?
You're talking about the Sabbath book?
Yes. Of course. Okay. So Quine, a philosopher who made significant contribution to the development of contemporary philosophy by rejecting the method of analytic synthetic distinction, which is the article you have that you skimmed over.
Not that I necessarily know anything about analytic synthetic distinction.
Based on a holistic and systematic linguistic framework. Well, so
what does that mean?
it means the Japanese know more about American philosophy than Americans.
Well, that's embarrassing.
You know, so except for some Americans, because I knew all about that. Because that was part of my course. I took mathematics. Well, I didn't take mathematical logic.
That sounds disgusting.
I had logic. I had intro to logic. I had advanced logic, and I had graduate level logic courses. I also had philosophy of language, and in fact, that was where I got all of my Quine stuff, was from the philosophy of language class. It was Dr. Crotty, Stephen Crotty. So what's this? So let's zero in on this distinction. Historically, by the way, one of the important things was he traveled to Europe as a graduate student, did postdoc work there, attending various. He attended the Vienna Circle meeting, believe it or not. You know, wow, and other places, and he was tasked, and it wasn't just Harvard. But he was tasked kind of to rescue Jewish professors, because remember, this was pre-Holocaust, but close. And so the concern a lot of Americans had, not all, very many really, compared to what we retrospectively would have wished.
Yes.
But since racism, anti-Semitism was actually rife in the United States, of course. Germany got it from us, maybe, in a manner of speaking. That's really kind of scary how that worked. And by the way, notice we still have it. Pittsburgh, just mentioned, the synagogue. He rescued at least a couple of the great professors by not saying, "Come with me, I'll save you," because that wouldn't have worked, because they didn't believe it, right? A lot of, like Einstein left, so he didn't need someone to prod him. He was on his way out the door, right? Although it was tough even for Einstein, because he didn't want to look like he was abandoning ship. He had family and stuff that wanted to stay. But he did actually run away from Berlin and was hiding, because there were assaults on significant Jewish intellectuals at the time. But what they did, he had jobs. He had, you couldn't spend, a year in California. Here's a job. You could Harvard. Princeton.
Harvard.
So he had tickets. Luggage. He said, yeah. So he had jobs that he helped them get to, and the lure was, you just go there for 1 year, then you can come back. But of course, once they got there, they, jeez, no way, heading back. So that was kind of another biographical detail. Another little biographical detail, that during World War II, he was in the Navy. He not enlisted, but he was in the Navy as a naval officer, but stationed in the D.C. area, and he worked on code breaking. And the codes that he was concerned with were the U-boats that were patrolling our coasts and bombing our shipping. Did you know that they did that?
Yeah.
So, kind of interesting. So he was breaking the code so we could figure out, I guess, what the U-boats were doing, etc. But the rest of his life basically is teaching mathematical logic at Harvard. And that was it, right? Except, on the summers, he would visit places, and I believe he actually tried to, and maybe did, visit every single country in the world, because he liked to do that. But by the way, when I asked his granddaughter to do a paper on him, they didn't. But they did get a friend to do a paper on him, and the friend interviewed Mrs. Roberts, his daughter, and we found out that the kids didn't really like him very much. He was, if you didn't speak mathematical logic, he didn't have much to say to you. So, but he did travel a lot, and he liked visiting, and then of course in his book, he described, we saw flowers, we saw this, we went to there, we visited this town, we had dinner at this restaurant, it's like a log of all the different places. Okay, so what made him famous? What made him famous was 2 dogmas of empiricism. And why is that so significant? I will use a magic marker here. Let's see how to do this. I'll stick this here. So you're familiar with the concept of the a priori. Yes? As we talked about Kant, and we talked about what's the easiest way? Maybe instead of a priori there, I'll put the traditional square of opposition. Let me put that. I'll put that on the screen. And I usually go to Stanford, and so here. So I won't write on here with a magic marker because that would be bad. However, so these 2 statement types, remember these are all 4 kinds of statements that we can make that are true or false. Aristotle, etc. Right? And these 2 are considered universals or analytic in the sense that they're like the definitions of the nouns that are the subject set of these statements. This would be more the definition. This would be what it's not, basically. So no dogs or cats, obviously not necessarily a definition of dogs and or cats, unless, of course, you're a Hegelian, in which case all of the negative aspects of a definition are actually part of the definition. So when I say you are a person, it's implied in English that you're also not a dog, not a cat, not a wall, not a sailboat. That's all part of knowing you're a person, right? Etc. Right? So these are analytic, traditionally, right? And these are synthetic, so they're not definitional. They're the kind of specific information you have about that horse is a mare. That boat is made out of soap.
Interesting boat.
It's melting. So these are synthetic, right? And ever since Aristotle, this is like 2 kinds of knowledge. This I can know just by reading about something. I can know about horses. I've never actually met one. I've seen some on TV, Mr. Ed, Trigger, I've seen a couple on TV. But, in fact, I think some of the horses I've met were actually just models of horses that, were going like this, where the actor was sitting there, how they do, in Westerns, right? So some of the horses I met might not really have been horses, etc. I'm not sure that that's a whole other issue. Right. But so analytic information you can know without actually having any experience of the object. But you can't have knowledge of this sort without the physical experience of the specific thing. Right. And then on top of that, we get the a priori, the a posteriori problem that comes from David Hume through Kant, who explains it, that indicates, so gee, we can have a priori information of horses because I've got my analytic information, and then I go and I see a horse and I recognize it because I have the a priori analytic information that leads me to understand that, etc. And so when we get into the nature of how language influences the way I perceive my world, which is the contemporary upshot of the Kantian problem, right? That I can't actually see the thing in itself because I'm looking at it through the filter of my human experience, etc. Today we accept that, although there are arguments over what that phenomena actually is. So Hegel argued that the phenomenal experience is actually the thing in itself. So you don't have to worry about the stuff that you can't know, because everything that we know is the phenomenal world. There is nothing outside of that. Although it is certainly puzzling why it is that I can't just wish things away. Well, partially that's because society won't let me.
Damn.
Exactly, right? Okay, so a significant difference between this and this. So when we look at the two dogmas of empiricism, this is essentially the dogmas that empiricists believe. And the problem is that I can actually equate. Maybe I won't need the board. Would this be a good way to look at it? That's not very convenient, is it? You don't, neither of you can read that fairly well. Let me try. What's this page look like? Oh, this is a PPT, which means I could do PowerPoint. You think that will help?
Possibly.
Awesome. Opening, adding, okay, so universal affirmative, every S is a P. Notice the square is tilted here. This was upper left, right? And this was upper right, so just so you're not lost, right? So there's your square. Let's see here. Huh. Isn't this neat? Somebody's actually, can't I just click next page?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I could do this. So universal introduction, English, oh, gee, this looks like a fool. Maybe not. This is too darn excellent, isn't it? So there you go. You could go and do this if you like. Notice that's pretty handy. Okay. Well, so looks like everything I searched for is a little bit more detailed than I would have liked for this brief explanation. Let me just say that if I say, for anything you pick, have I done this to you before? No? So for anything you pick, da-da-da-da-da. So this is essentially an A statement, right? So whatever A statement you have, right? If that's true, that's equivalent to saying that it's not the case that there exists something that is not that. Right? So if I say, for anything you pick, this is the case, it's equivalent to saying it's not the case that there is something that is not that. Because everything is. Everything is. It's universal. Okay. Notice, now I can say, for anything you pick, this is just other expressions, right? It's not the case, da-da-da-da-da. Basically a no statement, no dogs or cats, right? That's equivalent to saying that it's not the case that there exists something that is a dog that's a cat. These are equivalencies, right? Notice where the negation signs are showing up here. None here, one on each side here. One on this side here, one on this side here.
Can there only be two?
So what's happening that's making these equivalencies is that when I'm changing the quantifier, I change the quantifier, and all I have to do is put a negation sign in front of the quantifier and behind the quantifier. Now, in this particular case, you can see that if I double up, the rule is double negation. If I have a double negation, you actually have two negations here, but they cancel one another out.
Right.
So I'm actually just following an exact pattern either way you go, right? The next one, of course, would be, it's not the case that for anything you pick, right, so there's, so the next one, as you can imagine, would be this, right? So it covers all four possibilities, right? So this leads to my saying, well, there is one that is not that, right? And this one leads to, there is one that is that. And that works, if you sit and think to yourself, yeah, that's equivalent. Okay, well, here's the problem. These are analytic, and these are synthetic. So ever since Aristotle, so we're looking at, 2,400 years of history, that tells us that these are two different kinds of information, but lo and behold, Quine points out that they're logically equivalent, which means they're not two different kinds of information. So that analytic-synthetic distinction isn't a distinction. So all this time we've been thinking that there's different kinds of experience. What does that mean? Well, no, actually our knowledge base is updated constantly by experience. Quine is a neo-pragmatist, or a pragmatist with neo in front of it because, well, all the original pragmatists have long since died, so we've got to call them something else. So put neo in front of it. Neo, of course, is the name of one of the characters in the Matrix, who's the guy that doesn't get bamboozled by the pill thing. No, actually, that has nothing to do with Quine. It's just me joking. But you get the idea. Neo means new, although it's obviously misspelled if you're speaking English, because they used Latin instead. Am I funny, or is this just sad?
You're hilarious.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. So this is significant. This is 1952.
When all this came out?
Yes, and I remember being in the hospital,
Disgusting.
At the University of Pennsylvania.
In the hospital?
Being born, I was born in 1951.
Oh, well, that'll happen.
Actually, I was out of the hospital by the time this came out.
Okay.
But so I was home in an apartment in Philadelphia, just a couple blocks from the hospital, as my parents didn't go very far. And I remember the just everyone yelling out in the street. The fireworks that night. They celebrated for 3 days in Philadelphia with beating the piñatas and.
Oh. Yeah.
Didn't we have piñatas in Philadelphia in 1952? Maybe not. I don't know when. When did we import piñatas?
It's a tradition back then, everywhere just about.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted a piñata for their birthday.
Yes. Okay. Well, so yeah, this was big deal, and as you can see, the Japanese eventually would give Quine the Kyoto Prize. By the way, the Kyoto Prize is another one of those neat things that if you look it up, it's kind of like a who's who the winners were. You can actually figure out, wow, these people were significant, because the committee did all the work for you, trying to figure out who the significant people are. Another one, for example, Nobel Prizes. Look those up, and you can see significant scientists, economists, literature people. Pulitzer, of course, would be a great way to look up reporters and so on. The Templeton Prize would be individuals that have done great things regarding spiritual understanding, in literature mostly of some sort. The speakers who give the Gifford lectures in Edinburgh would be like another list of, so if you want to see lists of significant individuals that are worth paying attention to, those are some of the places where you could go find those things. We have the Kennedy Prize. We have some prizes in the U.S. The Kennedy Prize is usually given to people like Mark Twain, comedians, singers, Ella Fitzgerald, John Williams, composers. Philosophers? No. I don't recall us awarding any prizes to philosophers.
We have the National Doug Stamp Prize. That's worth $1 million.
Well, there you go. That'll...
Draw and paint good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what else is Quine famous for? Let's look at his marvelous page, thanks to Wikipedia. Absolutely wonderful. I don't know why this is the only Wikipedia page I've ever seen where the photo of the person is their passport picture with the stamp on it, which makes it look like he's lumpy. Of course, as always, the Wikipedia picture was the picture of Willard Van Orman Quine at birth. So you can see he had a tie on. We could also see him himself walking. This is a classic. It's funny, it doesn't give me. Queen? I don't want Queen. That would really be awful. I mean, I don't know what Queen you're talking about. Why is that not?
Maybe put his full name.
Oh, that's not Quine, that's some group doing that. I don't want that. That's just no fun. Why am I? Shoot. I want the one where he's walking along the... Ah, okay.
his autobiography, The Time of My Life, he recounts the joy of his walks from his home in Boston, along the banks of the Charles River, to his study in Emerson Hall at Harvard University.
Riveting
where he
reading.
worked as graduate student, lecturer, and professor for 64 years. Professor Quine was born in Nash Street in Akron, Ohio, on June 25th, 1908. He has one elder brother, Robert, and he recalls a generally happy childhood in an honest and hard-working family. Quine attended West
this is the video I was...
where he studied the scientific course. He graduated in 1926, and he entered Ohio's
So
Oberlin
for a
College
video they
to
say,
major in
okay,
mathematics
professor,
with
walk
honors
along the
in
river there.
Yeah, I'm gonna say.
Look
it's just
thoughtful.
Here,
all
Quine encountered the classics of modern logic, and as he said, the crowning glory
images of
of
him
Principia
on a boat
Mathematica
walking
by
around.
At least they don't have
Alfred North
quirky music.
which was later to be the
There are
subject of
some
Dr.
professors like Nussbaum walking along
1930 was
the
an eventful year
lake
for Quine.
in
His first
Chicago.
professional writing was published.
She's walking
Written
along,
under
and they have the
Foundation for
goofiest
Geometry
music
Introduction.
while she's walking
He was
along.
graduated summa cum laude.
But yeah,
from
yeah,
Oberlin.
go walk
He
over
won a
this way.
scholarship to Harvard for graduate
Watch
study
out for the
in philosophy
bicyclists.
Under
Ah.
Whitehead's supervision.
Phew.
And he married his first
Close call.
wife, Naomi Clayton, who bore him 2
Yeah,
years.
look down into this. Yeah, I can just imagine following the script.
Although Harvard in the 30s was a noted center of logic in the United States,
And
the real
is this
academy
just
in Europe,
me thinking
particularly
this is
Vienna,
really...
Göttingen, and
Blah.
Warsaw. Quine studied diligently at Harvard, and he received his Master of Arts degree after a year, and his PhD a year later at the age of 23. His excellence won him a postdoctoral traveling fellowship for a year. In 1932, the Quine set sail for Europe. Destination, Vienna. Following the dissolution
Vienna
of
Circle.
the Austro-Hungarian Empire after World War I, a group of philosophers, mainly with scientific backgrounds, had established in the 1920s a school known as the Vienna Circle. Their philosophy was called...
You didn't need me.
philosophy.
You can just watch
It
this,
was dedicated
right?
to the following: that the whole field of knowledge was taken up by science, that the role of philosophy was
What's
to
wrong with
analyze
that
and
building
scrutinize
behind
what was
him?
advanced by science,
I think it's
and
fake.
But it's there?
was provided by
I
logic.
think it's just a screen.
Quine was invited
Yeah, it's
to join the
probably
group.
green.
But the main
The
attraction
philosophy
of the
department
Vienna
on
Circle
Harvard
was
campus,
Rudolf Carnap, who was
Harvard
teaching
College,
in Prague.
Harvard University, whatever they call
Quine's
Harvard,
account of Prague.
is the Emerson
Carnap,
Hall.
who became a lifelong friend, Quine wrote warmly, "It was my first experience of sustained intellectual engagement. with
It's
anyone
not bad
of
for his
the
heart
generation,
having all this
let alone
exercise in
great
one
man.
day.
It was my most
So
notable
much
experience of
walking.
being
Where's his pants pretty
inspired
high?
by a living teacher.
Yeah, he
rather than by a
does.
book." After Prague, the next stop
I
was
think
Warsaw,
that happens
where
as you
Quine
get
stayed
older.
for a term. Here he
You need
met
to wear
friends
them
of the
higher?
Polish traditions, including Tarski, Leśniewski, and Lukasiewicz.
So those are some of the people he brought back.
My ideas were getting healthily dislodged. I was catching up with latter-day logic. Quine's exposure to the philosophical atmosphere of Central Europe was to have a profound and lasting effect on his life's work. Before returning from Europe, Quine got the news of his election to Harvard's newly formed Society of Fellows. A lectureship followed in 1936, and he has remained at Harvard ever since, except for visiting lectureships and his service in the United States Navy during World War II. Quine's war years were marked by
That's
a
Emerson
distinguished
Hall.
service record and domestic upheaval.
If you ever get a
He
chance
was
to
cited
visit
for outstanding performance of duty in naval communications
Harvard,
and honorably
visit
discharged
Emerson.
with the rank of lieutenant commander. During the same period,
That's a
Quine
student.
separated from his wife and they
Makes
divorced
sense.
in 1947.
He's already nuts.
The following year, he married Marjorie Boynton.
Every
They have a
philosophy
son,
student
Douglas,
ever.
and a daughter, Margaret.
I think that actually says Emerson Hall
Although
right there.
attended
If
to
you
Harvard,
probably couldn't
Professor
see it.
Quine is the quintessential cosmopolitan. And some might
If
say
you're in a
the
wheelchair
obsessive
and you have to
world.
get in, you have to go around the
He's
back.
visited 115 countries.
Sorry.
And has written and
That's
lectured
kinda
in 6
asshole-ish.
languages
They've
and on
kind
6
of-
continents.
Kind of
He's
built.
written 21 books, and the
special.
Philosopher's Index records over 1,000 works dealing with his
She
work.
is not a student.
He's received
Are you
16
sure?
honorary degrees.
She could be a student. You never know. She
That
might
might be
right
his
now.
wife.
Position of the greatest
Did he
problem
say?
of the profession.
I don't think so.
All philosophers have their critics.
Oh no, we're looking
Quine's
at
no
birds.
exception.
That's one of his critics.
Oh.
Hardly anyone throughout the world
You look
today
so
chooses to
sad.
use theoretical philosophy in the terms that
You
Quine
just-
has set out. Over the last 40 years, he has
It's like
outlined
a
what
very
there's
bad
not
Well, I'm gonna hold this door.
In this
I'm not even
village,
gonna, he didn't even hold that door open for that kid.
Professor Quine agreed to a personal
He's rude.
interview with me and to 6 private
You know, I don't know if he was autistic, but partly, maybe. It's
What?
kind of extreme maleness, you know.
Oh, so he just doesn't know.
The
Oh,
kind
look,
of...
we got an interview.
Yes,
spend hours
yes.
simply reciting them. But I'd like to get some idea.
That's
from
why
you
I kept it going,
about
so
your
that you'd
development
actually
as an
hear
individual
him
and as a philosopher.
speak. As
In
you...
your autobiography, you adopted a chronological approach, and I'd like to start.
The most boring
by going
approach
down the
there
same
is,
path.
right?
You portrayed your family in your autobiography as honest and hardworking, and industrious, and dedicated to being successful. Tell us a little about the Van Ormons and the Quines.
My father's father, Robert Quine, was born in the Isle of Man and went to sea under sail as a merchant seaman at the age of 16. And a few years later, dropped off in New York and
Good.
made his way in the following year or two, I suppose, to
I
Ohio.
can see why his biography is
Where-
boring, too.
There was already something of a Manx colony. And in those days, I'm told that Cleveland and Cape Town were the largest Manx populations outside the United Kingdom. He married
So
the
now you've heard even a Manx
daughter
talking
of
about the
a
Manx
German
people,
immigrant.
so you know that there
In fact-
really
in
is
fact,
such
the
a
daughter
thing as the
also
Manx.
was a native German who had come over had been brought over as a small
Visit the
child.
Island of Man,
A native of the
which has
Palatinate.
women on it too. So it's
And,
not just
so they settled in Akron, Ohio.
obviously not very many
Oh,
children
you
otherwise.
missed it last class.
What happened?
You missed it.
That's for
Oh my god. Okay, so there were drinking clubs at Harvard for only guys. And you were allowed to bring in a tall, skinny, blonde lady friend
That's
that
the
would do
ideal.
anything the men in the club wanted. And then you would get in. Yeah.
And then, so that's how the guys got in?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's the ideal.
Yeah. Plus, you had to be able to drink
And we're
like
not allowed.
fish.
And that's how you get
stay on your
like
feet.
connections, and that's how you like go into the workforce, like knowing people and getting good jobs and good money and shit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it was disgusting. We had our quiz question was on it, if we
But
agreed or
the-
not, and I strongly disagreed.
The book that I took that from and quoted in the class is in our local library, by the way. I didn't buy that book,
Oh,
and I returned it after I read it.
oh, so we can actually go and read
So
it.
you can actually go and read it, and you'll see.
How thoughtful.
You know, I'm just pointing you in the right direction for your research adventures. You know, and not doing other than that. So okay, there's a book that Quine wrote with a friend. What was it? The Web of Belief. It's actually the friend's. No, I don't want to do that. It's Google is not. Cooperating very well today. Maybe because I'm not using it. Actually. So the friend was J.S. Ulian. Ulian was a English teacher at Harvard, and he asked his colleague Quine to write a book for English majors that would explain how knowledge works in philosophy today.
Wait, he wrote a book for English majors on how to understand philosophy?
Epistemology, which is, of course, so if you think of philosophy, there's actually 5 main areas of concern.
Correct.
Epistemology would be the theory of knowledge. episteme is knowledge.
Yes.
Mathematicus is also knowledge in Greek, but episteme
Yeah.
is like the subject of knowledge. Logic would be a second area in
Yikes.
philosophy. Aesthetics, theory of beauty,
Yes.
third. Metaphysics, which would be the study of that which underpins the physical world, you know, what is out there, right? Which one did I forget? Ethics. So epistemology.
But why did he write
logic.
it for English majors specifically?
So, well, his friend Julian, Julian rather, came to him and said, so I've got English majors, they don't know anything about what philosophy says, about how we know, you're an expert, how about you write a book for English majors? And of course, Quine did, but Julian obviously co-authored it because he wanted it to be readable.
Smart.
Apparently he
You know,
read the
for
autobiography.
pardon?
Apparently he read the autobiography.
Well, you know, when Quine writes without help, it comes out with mostly mathematical symbols. You know, which I can see why his children were not especially fond of conversations with their father, because you know, if you don't use mathematical symbols in your speech, you know, for all x, you know, if it is a bowl of cereal, then it has milk, and it's getting soggy, and it's sitting in front of your place at the table.
Do you
Dad, you know, that would be, you know, how would you explain? You've got cereal, Dad. No, you have to go. If it is the case that it is a,
Dear
I'm just kidding. I don't know how they spoke in the house. But you had a question.
It was silly.
It was silly.
Yeah.
I love those.
Okay. Do you put the milk in first, or do you put the cereal in? Or which one is it? Do you put the cereal?
Traditionally, we put the cereal in the bowl first.
Mm-hmm.
Because it works the same way as that famous experiment where the guy comes in to the class and says, so here's a jar, you know, and he puts the marbles in.
Yeah, I love that.
And he says, is the jar full? And everyone's like,
everyone's
oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
like,
then he
oh,
puts,
okay.
like,
And then he pours in
gravel,
sand
and
or
then
something.
sand, and then,
And then-
water.
Yeah, you know it better than I do, so there, yeah.
Wait, but so how does that relate to cereal? Does it
Well,
matter?
so if you filled the bowl with milk,
But does it matter?
then
if
you put the cereal in it, the milk would overflow the bowl.
Would
But
it?
if you put the,
But you put the cereal in first.
We
and
should
fill
test
it,
this.
And then you pour the milk.
yeah,
Pardon?
It
No,
fills
it
it.
fills in the gap.
Yeah, see.
Have we tested this?
We should do it.
You're welcome to test it, but please do it in your kitchen.
I can't come over to your house and do it.
I definitely think we should do it in class.
I agree.
And
We're
then,
not supposed to make a mess.
well, we don't have to make a mess. We could do it.
We
like-
don't know if it'll make a mess until we try.
We could do it in bowls and only fill it like halfway.
I
John.
can tell you, it will make a mess.
I'll bring the spoon.
Are you speaking from experience?
Well, if you have children,
Much
they could get this process.
I
mixed
do not
up,
have
you know.
children, and I do not plan on having
Oh,
children
okay. Well,
anytime soon.
You
I
can
am
always
a
just buy
child.
children. You don't
I'm a
have to- you don't have to
21-year-old
make them.
child.
Yeah, you
Dear
can buy
God.
them. I can. Well, adoption.
How do you
adoption.
child though? How do you even? I don't understand.
Well, that's the English version. So, to child.
To child, yes.
Yes. Whereas if you're in Germany, it would be how do you kinder? You know, and
Like
if
the
you're in
egg?
France, it's
Yes, like
you know, how do you I mean
Here
So-
we go. Yes.
Yeah, and they leave you chocolate little gifts too.
Yeah. That are not allowed in the United States.
Love diapers.
Mm.
so French children.
I don't know what's happening.
Ah, c'était le matin, on est dans son frigo. se réveiller
Woke up.
et vu
So,
que ces bébés singes étaient partis.
we're gone.
Et a vu que les bébés singes, ils s'étaient perdus dans les arbres.
I don't know what you did.
Et puis
You
après,
clicked on
alors,
something.
qu'est-ce qui
and
s'est
it's-
passé?
Ils avaient vu des chauves-souris.
Chauve-souris?
Ils
Ah,
avaient vu
yeah.
des crocodiles, des hippopotames, des
Click the
girafes.
link to it.
It's just
Avec leur
medicine.
très bon voyage.
Well, this is
Et ils n'ont même pas pris le train. Et ils l'ont vu.
Try pressing
crocodile.
escape.
There's a crocodile.
Ils avaient vu des gros
They saw
loups,
frogs.
des
Foxes
boîtes
with
avec
animals who are poor.
des
Wow.
animaux qui sont pauvres.
Poor
Qui ne trouvaient
animals.
plus leur chemin.
Wait, what does
Des
this have to
gens
do
qui
with
voulaient
children?
emprisonner
I mean,
des
obviously she's a
animaux qui
this is
child.
sont
an example of
Ils
a
n'avaient pas
French
mangé,
child
ils ne pouvaient pas
who's
payer. Ils étaient dans les
not
dans les arbres
not acting
terribles,
childlike.
avec des
She
hippopotames,
is
des
acting
hippopotames, des crocodiles, des
enfant,
loups,
les
des
enfants.
fantômes
She's
qui
an
roulent à
exemple
sauter dans les arbres très
la
haut.
de les enfants, right?
Et
She's
puis,
infante.
il a
So
vu les
cute.
singes.
Isn't she
Et
though?
ils sont
But I bet she's terrible when she's cranky. That's what I'm scared of.
This is already old, so I bet she's a smelly teenager
A
now.
smelly teenager, that's what you think of as teenagers?
I'm
I
just
know they're
quoting.
smelly.
I'm just
Elle
quoting.
voulait pas du tout,
Uh-huh.
parce que c'était ses frères à elle.
They were her strawberries.
Vagré. Et c'est le loup qui a gagné. Et puis c'était lui le roi.
I used that video once in a lecture where the main point of my lecture, it was to teachers, and I said you have to teach to the level of the course, basically, which, by the way, was my task. They said, teach everyone how to teach to the level of the course. And so I had an example of beginning French, middle French, and more difficult French. Just use that as an example, not because anyone there spoke French, but because as an example of if you're teaching any course you pick, if you start with the hardest vocabulary before you start with the easiest, students aren't going to follow it. You have to start with the easy and gradually add to it. So it was fun. It was actually one of the funniest lectures I ever gave because the class the group just absolutely thought it was hilarious. Part of the reason for it, though, was because the president of the college had just given a lecture, and it was not funny, but it was like, after college I went and I worked for a non-government for a non-profit organization, in foreign countries, teaching, the people, things, etc. And then I came out, and I don't know why I did it, but I just basically copied everything he had just said, except applied it to, what I was doing, right? So after college, I joined a non-profit organization called the United States Army, and everybody laughed.
Dear
And I
God.
said, and our job was to go overseas and to teach people, and everybody. It was just absolutely hilarious. It worked out really well. And it was like I just had that template, because the president had done his lecture, then he left, right? And so it was perfectly possible for me to screw him over, by imitating everything he had said. And so I had people left. I still, every once in a while, I'll see one of those folks someplace, and they'll say, that was the funniest. So that's pretty cool. Okay, well, so The Web of Belief, you could go on and you could, that is an easy book. It's the easiest book that Quine ever wrote. Anyone can read it. Whereas if you read
His autobiography.
Word and Object, another really significant book, is Word and Object. system of logic, mathematical logic, selected logic papers. Here's the web of belief. From a logical point of view is essays, but they are, and that was the copy I had in class in graduate school when I had two dogmas of empiricism and the rest of the, from a logical point of view, word and object. And the issue here is how so going back to Bertrand Russell and his logical atomism, his attempt to explain how language works and how you can know whether a statement is true or false, how it works, right, is to argue basically, that you take Aristotle's logic and you look at the statement when we, say all horses are animals. You say, how do you know that's true? I just flippantly said, of course we know this is true, and I could just do a vote. Does everybody agree? And everybody in the class would agree. But the question that Russell took it to was, how do we know intuitively, that this works, right? And of course, how do you get to puzzling statements that it ought to give us that kind of intuitive sense, but if it's the round square cupola on Berkeley College is pink, right? Okay, well, wait a minute. There is an object on the Berkeley campus, not the one in California. It's a different college. I looked it up. I had to look it up because I was like, where is this place? I wanted to see it. It's not there anymore as far as I know. But there was I think it's in England, actually, this Berkeley College. Or Ireland, probably, because Berkeley was Irish. English, born in Ireland. So, always thought of himself as Irish, but you could always argue the point. In any case, the people on the campus called it the round square cupola. And that was, I guess, a campus joke, right? Because you can't have something that's both a round and square, right? Because they're contrary, right? And if that's the case, then describing something with a definite description, that phrase, right, should point to a specific thing, that you're then saying, and it's pink, and we could all agree, yes, it is. But so an important part of language's ability to succeed in giving us information is to actually succeed in referring to something and in trying to figure out how does the language refer to that object. It's because it sort of, as Wittgenstein would call it, paints a picture of the object in some way, right, etc. By the way, this is a presentation I found near TED. So this is, I don't have time to play the whole thing, but I'll play a little of it. She's fantastic, by the way. She was originally from the Ukraine. See if you could tell her accent.
So, I'll be speaking to you using language, because I can.
What accent?
This is one of these magical abilities that we humans have. We can transmit really complicated thoughts to one another. So what I'm doing right now is I'm making sounds with my mouth as I'm exhaling. I'm making tones and hisses and puffs, and those are creating air vibrations in the air. Those air vibrations are traveling to you, they're hitting your eardrums, and then your brain takes those vibrations from your eardrums and transforms them into thoughts. I hope that's happening. So, because of this ability, we humans are able to transmit our ideas across vast reaches of space and time. Right? We're able to transmit knowledge across minds. I can put a bizarre new idea in your mind right now. I could say, imagine a jellyfish waltzing in a library while thinking about quantum mechanics. Right? Now, if everything has gone relatively well in your life so far, you probably haven't had that thought before. But now I've just made you think it through language. Now, of course, there isn't just one language in the world. There are about 7,000 languages spoken around the world. And all the languages differ from one another in all kinds of ways. So some languages have different sounds, they have different vocabularies, and they also have different structures. Very important.
So I highly recommend watching that whole, it's only, 14 or so minutes. You know how TED Talks are. And that's not only hilarious, but also very interesting. And as you can see...
The worst news is that right now, that you think. And that gives you the opportunity to ask, why do I think the way that I do?
Well, we've asked that already several times. Quine, by the way, has, among other theses, so I've just mentioned the 2 dogmas, the book with Ulian for the English majors, The Web of Belief. By the way, it describes, using the metaphor of like the spider web, that if you think of our beliefs as kind of a network of beliefs, and the ones in the center of the web are the ones that are most important to us, but the edges of the web are in contact with the empirical world, and so there's influences that keep affecting the web. Some do actually all penetrate deeply and cause main web restructuring, etc. But so the wonderful metaphor to talk about that. He also in the book talks about the main rules of good thinking, which turn out to be very useful. Simplicity, keep your theories, as simple as possible. On the other hand, they can't be ad hoc. That they're so simple that you have to create a new theory everything that happens, right? They've got to be general enough to explain all sorts of things. So it's that one's a good book. But there's other things. One of the things that it just reminded me when she's talking about the 7,000 languages that are out there. And actually, I would disagree with that and say that if you think in terms of sub-languages, there are actually way more than that, because each field, in a sense, has its own sub-language. So if we think that there are 250 different neuroscience specialties, I've read that some neuroscientists in one specialty can't actually talk to the neuroscientists in the other specialty because their vocabulary is so different, right? So in a sense, they can certainly speak English to one another. So if one says, "Can you go and get coffee?" I'm sure that they will go and bring back the wrong coffee, because when someone else goes gets your coffee, they always get the wrong coffee. But that would be expected, right? But nonetheless, if they're talking about specific chemical nodes in a certain neuron and how it impacts other chemical nodes, and whatever, I bet they, what are you talking about? I don't get it. They would have problems with that sort of thing, theoretically, right? So if you think that way, and I'm very confused about the border of languages. I've said I'm not sure English is a language, because after all, it's a hodgepodge.
Yeah, it's all languages.
Which is Yiddish. Hodgepodge is Hungarian, actually, as far as I know. If I say it's a mishmash, that's Yiddish, but, there's...
Exhibit B.
Yeah. Well, I actually have a book on the origins of English, and the very beginning of it said, what words can we trace back to actually English? And one of the first words it said is death. I thought, wonderful. That's
very positive.
Yeah, very positive. Okay, but Quine has a thesis, and it's called The Indeterminacy of Translation Thesis. And that should give us an opportunity for a quiz question.
Oh, God. I don't know if I can answer it.
Indeterminacy of translation. Did I spell that right?
I think so. No.
I obviously didn't. But so here's the thesis propounded by American analytic philosopher Quine. The classic statement of this thesis can be found in his book Word and Object, etc. Determinacy of translation. So basically, translating from one language to another is an art. It's a skill. And by the way, if you want to translate something and see just how difficult things are, is that a fish in your ear? There's all kinds of fun stuff. This book is written by the chair of the foreign language department at Princeton, David Bellows. Absolutely hilarious examples of translation problems. Other ones, Umberto Eco has a wonderful little book in English, which is translated from the Italian, because Umberto Eco was an Italian philosopher. Right? Is that funny or what? Right? But problems in translation, right? So that's whoa. Okay, so how did the translator translate the problems? Right. Right? But so you get into this is hilarious stuff, and you get, of course, situations where you can have, as Le Tombeau, Marat. This is another fun book. This is by Hofstadter. His most famous book was Gödel, Escher, Bach, right? Or usually just referred to as GEB. But it's absolutely fantastic book that includes basically essays about various kinds of mathematical and scientific problems.
Sounds disgusting.
Yes, I suppose so. Unless, of course, you're interested in that sort of thing.
Of course.
In which case, this is like a cult. Yeah.
Cult.
Yeah.
Dear God.
Hofstadter would publish articles in the what's the Science magazine? Not Science magazine, but Scientific American. I think was his. So he had collections of. One of his other books is like a collection of a whole bunch of his earlier essays from the magazine. So you can. But this particular book, there's a poem on this cross. This is a cemetery.
No.
And this is a poem that he got curious about. It was written by a guy named Marat, M-A-R-O-T, and decided to translate it while he was on tour in France. So he started translating it, gave it one shot, thought, that was interesting, tried again, did lots of his own translations of the same poem. They were all accurate, but different, different aspects of it. Do you want to be word for word? Do you want to try to keep the tone of the poem? Do you want to have the rhyme, the scheme of the poem? He emailed his friends, like 40 or more friends, and asked them to all give it a shot, and they all sent their own translations of the poem. And then his wife, by the way, also did, and her translation of it was my favorite, by the way. But it was also sad, because Carol, his wife, died while he was writing this. And in fact, this is a get well poem, which obviously didn't work, right?
Is that why it's in a graveyard?
You guys.
Yes. Yes.
This is morbid.
And
Can we just have our quiz question? Come on, you're making us sad. This is sad.
Okay.
Actually, a lot of people.
All right.
Well, there's a good. So why would that be sad?
Why would his wife's death after translating?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Why would his wife's death be sad?
Why would his wife death be sad?
Why would his wife's death?
Especially when you think of her translation being the.
Well.
I'm not sure that really became a question about the indeterminacy of translation, but Yeah, sadness is a thing. How do we translate sadness? Is sadness that you experience the same as the sadness I experience?
No, because we've all had different experiences and thus have
Whoa,
different.
so you read Quine.
No, I've just read a lot of Kant.
Oh, well, that too.
Mm.
Of course, Kant was incapable of such feeling, I think.
Which is sad because he had a lot of opinion on conscience and morality when he didn't have it himself. How can someone write that's a good question. How can someone write about a subject that they don't necessarily understand themselves because they haven't experienced it?
Or maybe they do understand.
That's why they can't experience it? Because they understand it?
Well,
This
two
is the type of questions I like.
two people have a shared experience
Mm-hmm.
and do not
But
necessarily
they
feel the
experience
same.
things differently because they're different people.
Now put that into words and email it to me, and we're good. That way.
Okay.
Is that
I,
great?
but I thought we were talking about why this is sad. Which do you want?
All of
Yes.
the above.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what did I just say? You're supposed to remember these
You
things.
have to add
It's
the.
wait, just watch the video.
We
and
all,
type up
yeah.
what I wrote.
My quiz question is on this video. My answer to the quiz question. Okay, we all experience, right? Experience different things.
She always sends me her response before even getting up out of the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it's fresh in my mind.
Because that way I can check her email and I can remind myself what the quiz question was, so I can put it.
You're welcome. Well, we all experience different things within ourselves.
Well, be safe out there. Next week we meet on Tuesday, but not on Thursday.
That's because we're going to be stuffing our faces.
Yes.
Wear your fat pants, everyone.
I am not going to be going to the UAA feast on Thursday as
Yeah,
we
'cause
usually do.
Because your son's wife invited you to Thanksgiving.
How did you know?
Because you told us last class. Or I read minds, whichever
I'm
one you
excited
think.
about it.
It'll be good, I'm glad. It'll be a nice change.
It will. It will. Although going to the Gorsuch Commons, to the dining facility there, all of the various types of holiday foods available.
Is there lots?
Only ask, yes, as much as you can stuff your faces with. Wear
So
your fat
you
pants.
really need your fat pants for the
Yeah.
UAA.
And it's free.
And it's
Even
free.
better.
You
Woo!
don't even need your.
So you need your
UAA
extra
ID.
large fat pants.
Because it's for the entire community.
Okay.
And yet
Very
the
well,
entire
very
community
noted.
does not go. It's almost always not
Is it just
nearly
like
full.
professors?
No, I don't know. You know, I see people there every year that I usually don't see anywhere else, but nonetheless.
Fascinating.
Good class.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the class lively and
Well, I
hilarious.
try to. Sometimes I can't build off of what you're saying because I don't necessarily understand it myself. But when I do, I try.
Just ask questions too.
Most of my questions would be like, huh?
That's a good one. I know exactly what you mean.